I've had one too many, moments of explosions in my life where I started to realize something, it has to be done differently. And so that self-awareness piece is paramount.
Hey guys, this episode we have Caleb Campbell. He is a West Point graduate, Army officer, NFL linebacker, keynote speaker, and tremendous at helping us as high achievers recognize what it actually means to be successful. So if you are a high achiever, you are going to want to hear this episode because it talks more about this idea that typically we're not having a performance issue, we're having a capacity issue. One of his quotes that he shared with me that I loved was the idea of we're not trying to add more to our plates, we're trying to make the plates stronger. So listen into this episode from Caleb and I to learn a little bit more about what it means to truly understand what success can look like and how to maybe get out of your own way when it comes to success. Caleb Campbell in the building, sir. I am excited. I say that about every guest because every guest I get excited about, but I'm super pumped for you, my man. I'm looking forward to continuing conversations we've already had, to be honest, but diving into you a little bit. NFL linebacker, Army officer, West Point graduate, keynote speaker. When I say I have high achievers on the list, you fit the bill, my friend. So thank you so much for coming on board.
Thanks for having me. I love the little space you've created here and the conversations that you are engaging in. So it's an honor to be here, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, there's so many people out there talking about achieving at high levels, right? Performance enhancing knows no bounds in the space of sports, in the space of leadership and everything in between. But the conversation about how can you perform at a high level and also maybe not burn out, also hold space in your heart to be more than just, a linebacker or more than just a boss or more than just those things is a space I think we need to continue to talk more and more about. How do we hold both of those things in our heart without either one of them being good or bad, right?
Yeah. Removing the judgment from it is a crucial aspect. But I think the conversation, especially when we're seeing the burnout rates, the mental health challenges, I don't think those are obstacles in our way. I think they're invitations for us to do achievement differently. I think they're invitations for us to grow parts of maybe ourselves that have been ignored or even worse off, betrayed in our pursuit of achievement. And so I've always, this last season of my life, meaning when I walked away from the NFL, I really was trying to answer a question of knowing that I'm a high achiever, knowing that there's this sense that something is missing in me, knowing that there's more to accomplish, more to achieve, more to do, more to see, but how can I do it in a way that I don't lose myself in the process? How can I do it in a way that feels more like a participation and less like surviving? How can I do it differently? So that's really the journey that I've been on. So again, these conversations light me up. Yeah,
that's awesome. And it's funny. Most people, when they hear I made it to the NFL, you're like, oh, you've won, right? There's nothing more to do, right? I used to do high school sports performance and middle school and everything in between. What do you want to be when you grow up? That 70% of the boys in that room, we're going to say either NFL or MLB, right? And so you think NFL, you think pinnacle, you think I've made it. Mm-hmm. And yet what you're saying is I know there's more that I want to do with my life. Yeah. And there was something in the way. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey you went on and recognizing that in yourself.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a 4-wing 3. So I'm, the individualist, but also have that achieving side, the performer side to me. And the 4 in me was very visible when I was younger, meaning there was always a thirst, a desire to do something meaningful, to do something special, to make a difference, to actually contribute, to rise above the status quo. That's been in me since I was just a young boy. And then the way that I saw that possible was through this pursuit of excellence, was through the pursuit of achievement. And so it helps when, you're scoring game-winning touchdowns in the community all-star championship game. And, you quickly learn that acceptance is driven by great performance. And the challenge with that is that at some point early on in my life, performance was no longer something that I did or didn't do. It just became who I was or who I was not, worse off. And so I've always had this deep thirst and desire to achieve great heights. And it was really in an attempt to maybe satisfy the ache or the longing to do something meaning and special in my life. And more specifically, it was probably more so to satisfy this ache that just felt like something was missing. Right? Something is missing. I can't really put my finger on it. It's elusive, but I can feel it. It's like this subtle ache in the core of my being everywhere I go, and everything that I do, the ache is there. And when I experience some measure of achievement, the ache dissipates momentarily. I think I figured it out. But there it goes, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 3 months later, resurfacing in my life. And I'm like, God damn it. And so when I got to the NFL, this crescendo, this moment in time where I was just so convinced that if we could just get there, like this will be it. And it was a very rude awakening. One of my all-time favorite writers and speakers, somebody who has just had unparalleled influence in my life, is a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr. And he talks about this concept called the divine ambush. And that divine ambush is kind of like when the ground that you were standing on that was once so steady and sturdy is suddenly pulled out from underneath you, and everything is suddenly shaking and wobbly and nothing makes sense. And I say that and I bring it up because when I got to the NFL and I reached this level of success in my life, and sure, the NFL could have been more successful, where I could have performed better in the NFL, but there was something that in me that knew when I reached that level of success in my life, I was playing a losing game because the ache was still there. If anything, the ache was larger, the gap was larger, the void was larger, like it was more intense. And I know it was because now that I got to the NFL, there's more to lose. And so I found myself in this very surprising, very unique, but not necessarily, I think it's more so familiar to a lot of folks. And it's this place where like I was using all of my energy to hold together the success that I had created, but the success that I had created became a burden to carry, not a life to enjoy. And I was afraid of letting that go, but deep down I knew that something was still missing. But I was at this height of my life. Like I was at the height of my career. Like, how do I let it go? How do I satisfy this ache that's happening in me? And so I just got to this point where it all kind of became a divine ambush. Everything just kind of started to unravel in that season of my life. When you look at from the external perspective, like I had it all together. I just reached the dream. I was the second player in the history of West Point to ever get selected in the NFL draft, the first player given the permission to go and play. Like I was living my childhood dream, but internally, I was emotionally and mentally bankrupt. Like I was barely holding it together. And so I knew that there was a new evolution, a next evolution of success that I was being invited into. I just didn't know how to access it. And that's really the journey that I had been on since.
That's powerful. There's so many lessons to be learned there. But one of the things I want to hear from you, because it sounds as though you're saying that achievement started to find a different definition for you.
Mm-hmm.
There started to be in you this different feeling of what achievement could be. And it sounds like there's still a journey beyond there. And frankly, I think you probably are similar to me in knowing that the journey never ends. Right? It's a process, not a project. That's what I tell my clients, right? Our lives are a process. But has there been something in you that has started to see achievement in a different light? Is it a different definition? Is it a different goalpost that you're striving for? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I've realized for me personally, it's a great question. Achievement is still achievement. The driving forces behind my achievement is what changes, is what needs to be kind of inspected or explored. And when I started to peel back the layers of my ambition and starting to look at really the driving forces behind my achievement, it doesn't mean that I'm doing less these days, but the energy behind how I do everything has changed, which has therefore changed my experience of achievement, which has changed my sustainability of success, right? It was being able to have the self-awareness, deploy the self-awareness, use my pursuit of success as a mirror to reflect back to me the internal growth that needed to take place in conjunction with the external pursuits. And when I learned how to play that dance with my pursuit of achievements and my pursuit of success, like suddenly I wasn't just externally accomplishing things, but I was also internally deepening in my life. And those two working simultaneously, I've realized is kind of the whole approach to success. It's the whole approach to achievement so that one, we can actually fucking enjoy our success in life. Right? Like how many of us are experiencing the success we've worked so hard to create, but again, we can't even enjoy it because we're too busy trying to survive it. That's a real place to be in. And then two, we can enjoy, and then also we can achieve, and we can still go home and be present with the people that we love the most. We can have a moment where we're sitting on the couch and not beating ourselves up because we tell ourselves that we should be working harder or we should be using that time to figure things out and to get to that next level of success. No, like this, for me, this journey of redefining achievement as, yes, external pursuits and also internal deepening. The biggest shift that is created in my life is my life has felt less like a survival and more like a participation. And I feel in my life, I'm participating in my life. I'm part of my life. I'm dancing in my life. I'm not surviving my life and calling it success. And that was a big moment for me. I ramble a lot.
No, that was gold. You're not surviving in your life and calling it success, right?
Yeah.
That is what a lot of people are doing. They're surviving
successfully.
Yeah, exactly. And congrats, right? Like you're not thriving at that point. Yeah. So some of the studies that I do are in sports psychology, behavior psychology. And so you probably to a certain degree understand that idea of external versus intrinsic motivation. You're speaking to it a little bit here. And I think there's this push against external motivators as this kind of demonized aspect of motivation, right? Like don't go for it just because of the trophy. Don't go for it just because of the looks or because somebody else is going to be proud of you or things like that. But I think to a degree, some of those things can be beneficial. And you spoke to this a little bit, like you striving for the sake of accomplishing, right? For some sort of external reward. But I think you hit the nail on the head is at some point, it has to shift to this place of intrinsic rewards. I'm doing this because of who I am as a person, and I feel rewarded in that. But that can be hard.
Not trying to prove who I am.
Yeah. What do you know? What in you helped make that shift? That mindset.
A good therapist.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, absolutely. I talk about this. I'm writing my first book, and the second chapter is called, or maybe the third chapter is called Pain's Paradox. And it's very similarly like pain is an incredible motivator. Like our early childhood trauma or that moment of betrayal, whatever it was, like, my God, what a beautiful motivator to light the fire underneath you and for you to start diving deep and really pursuing success, right? And we often will attribute that with like kind of thoughts along the lines of just watch and see, I'll prove you wrong. It's just I've got this under control. And pain is an incredible motivator. Fear is an incredible motivator until it isn't. And so really those external motivators, that external reward, it is a great motivator. It is until it isn't. And it's on us to have the awareness, to cultivate the awareness, to realize when that story has come to an end and it's time to turn the page and start a new chapter, right? That's really the divine ambushes in our lives. Those are the moments of internal restlessness or moments of just this deep, dissatisfaction around our life, despite accomplishing the things that we have always set out and dreamed about accomplishing. And so if we can start paying attention to these momentary invitations that often come disguised as setbacks or disguised as uncomfortable emotions, these are the messengers in our lives saying, hey, it's time to evolve. Hey, it's time to do it a little bit differently. You've maxed out this level of growth. Congratulations. You did it. You played the game and you played it well. Now I'm going to invite you into a deeper, more expansive experience of growth. The challenge is that in between those two experiences, there's what we like to call liminality. a liminal space, the space between who you once were and where you're going, but it's not yet quite clear on how to get there. And that in-between space is a descent. It's not an ascent. It's not a figuring it out. It's not a pushing through. It's not a trying harder. It's more of a resisting less, trying softer, letting go, slowing down, stillness. It's a whole different game. And so a lot of my work when I'm working one-on-one or inside of the deepening container that I have, it's helping people understand when they reach that threshold of the external rewards that once served them well as just a prime motivator and has helped them achieve great success. And that game has run its course. Hey, how do we hit up against that threshold? How do we cross over that threshold? How do we navigate the tension of the in-between space, that liminal space? There's a reason why, ancient mystics would call it, crazy time, because in that in-between space, you actually feel like you're going fucking crazy, right? And then how do we emerge out on the other side with expanded potential, possibility, and purpose, and do life a little bit differently? Tap into the deeper essence of who we are and allow that to be the driving forces in our lives. No longer trying to move our lives forward and need to prove our worth, but to operate from a place of knowing our worth. That changes everything, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just about navigating. For me personally, it was for me, I think it was just like the wild curiosity on how do I do this differently? I asked so many questions. Like, I knew more success in the way that I was doing it was not going to be synonymous with more fulfillment. So how do I do it differently? How do I play a new game? And so much of my work now is holding that space for high achieving, high performing individuals who are longing to do it differently, but they've only known one game. They've only known one playbook their entire life. And there's this new game that they're being invited to play with a new playbook, but they don't know how to call the plays.
Yeah, I love that. So I know my listeners are going to feel this way because I'm feeling it right now. When a high achiever hears that idea of slowing down, backing up, taking it easy, just take a step back, right? Just like you're saying, you almost feel crazy because it just goes against who you are as a person, at least on the surface, right? Because both of, you say this idea of like, I wanted to figure out how can I do it differently. That's still that achieving within you, but recognizing that what I'm currently doing is not working. So how do you have the conversation with the people that you're working with when you say that idea to them, that idea of slowing down and taking it easy, and they're like, immediately their hairs go up like, ooh, I can't do that. Who will I become if I do that? How do you help them navigate that?
Yeah, I think we have to understand that slowing it down does not necessarily mean doing less. Right. And I think that's really important because, I've had this conversation from stage sometimes, and I've realized that like a lot of people, when I hear me say about slowing down or, embracing more stillness, they immediately equate that with laziness. No, I equate that with courage. Right. And so it's not about necessarily doing less. Now, could that mean maybe actually taking more time off? Maybe. Yeah, absolutely. But if you're a high achiever, like you can probably attest to this, I love the work that I do. I love running fast. I love going hard. I really, really love that. So the real work in slowing down is starting to deploy, again, the curiosity and the awareness around the driving forces behind why going fast is so important to begin with, why making a difference and achieving great success is so fucking important to begin with. Like, really, what is it and why is it so important? And so when I say slowing down, what I mean by that is you are developing the awareness, you're developing the curiosity that whenever you feel maybe like you're behind and you feel that sense of panic settle in on you, like a wet towel being wrapped around you, and it's just a little uncomfortable, and you start getting a little agitated and you start doubling down on willpower, telling yourself to figure it out, to push through the pain, to work harder. Right? Slowing down doesn't mean that you don't do the day's work. Slowing down means you stop for a second and you peel back the layers of that agitation and that frustration, and you start identifying, well, what's the fear behind all of this? What if I actually don't make it? Like, what am I actually scared of? One of my favorite quotes is from a woman named Barbara Brown Taylor, and she says it's not the sadness that sinks a person's life. It's the energy a person spends avoiding sadness that sinks a person's life. It's not the fear that's going to sink your life. It's not the panic. It's not the depression. It's not the anxiety. It's not the stress. It's the energy we spend avoiding those things. And what we do so damn well is we avoid it in the name of performance, in the name of success, in the name of accomplishment, in the name of productivity. You can call it what you want to call it, but at the end of the day, it's still avoidance. So slowing down is having the curiosity and the awareness to understand, what are we actually avoiding? How do I meet that with compassion and with grace and intentionality? And how do I rewrite that story and replace it with a new one so that I can allow that new story to motivate me in a healthier, more sustainable, integrated way?
Yeah. One of the things you're talking about, Caleb, which I love, is this idea of being mindful, right? Mindfulness. Yeah. I'm sure you've probably, it sounds like you've dove into that world a little bit, right? Yeah. Being aware of why we feel the way we feel. One of my favorite teachers in mindfulness is a guy named Joseph Goldstein, in meditation practice. He brought it into the Western culture very deeply, and has been doing it for a long time. But one of the things he painted a picture of once that really resonated with me was, there are two different ways that you can be moving forward. One is, picture this: a guy is stumbling, falling forward on his feet, barely able to keep himself up, almost busting his face every step that he takes, right? And it's that idea of we're rushing forward, but we don't have the feet underneath us. We're moving forward, but not in a controlled way in which we feel like we're doing it on purpose, right? And then there's the rushing forward of you actually have your feet underneath you. You're leaning into what you're doing, but you're doing it in a purposeful way. You're doing it under control. Both individuals are moving forward, but one of them is obviously doing it with intentionality. And it's the same thing I think you're sharing here, which is this idea of you can still be going forward and fast, probably faster than most other people, without having to stumble forward, without having to ignore where you're trying to go or what you're trying to get away from. Because typically, if we're running really fast, to your point, we're probably running from something. And it's this idea of running away from these feelings of sadness or fear, which all emotions are just information. It's just telling us something that our body needs us to hear. Yeah. And if we ignore it, it's just going to get worse. So I love that on so many levels.
That was a much better analogy than the one I gave, but yeah, you're right on. Yeah.
I don't know about better, but I agree to both of them. They're powerful.
Agree. Yeah. Yeah. And this is the moment, like, I remember I used to be like the most erratic person. Like I would just run and I was just a bulldozer. And I sacrificed not only my mental and emotional well-being, but I also like bulldozed my way through a lot of, relationships and people, because success was the most important thing, and getting the job done was the most important thing, and proving my worth was the most important thing. And it took me a lot of time to be able to practice the awareness and the mindfulness, just to slow down and be more present with the driving force behind my life. And as a result, I still accomplished just as much, if not arguably even more. And I have not compromised or undermined the quality of my life, hence the relationships of my life. And so it's taken a lot of work to get here, but I'm saying it because it's possible. You can achieve more without actually losing yourself in the process. And that's the ultimate achievement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've always found that the most important, most worthwhile things in life are hard to do, right? If they were easy, we'd all be doing it and they probably wouldn't be worth much. Yeah. So you mentioned this idea of going on this journey of shifting your mind. You mentioned, kind of in jest, having a really good therapist, but I fully endorse everybody having somebody to talk to, whether they do it professionally or not. I think that's phenomenal. But what other practices, what other things have you been using to help you on this journey? Obviously there's meditation, but what other things have you been using as ways or tools to help you shift this mindset of continuing to be a high achiever, but maybe doing it in a different light?
It's a great question. And I have my immediate answer, but let me think for a second, because I'll give you the surface level kind of answer first, which is still, it's still very, very impactful. It's changed my life. And then maybe we'll go a little deeper, but when when I left the NFL, I moved to Canada, became a janitor of an organization, slept on a basement floor of a boiler room, cleaned toilets, washed windows, changed light bulbs so that I can basically have free therapy. Not what I had in my bingo cards for the vision for the year of that year. But when I tell you that season of my life radically, profoundly transformed my life, I mean it. And it was simply because I was really learning how to deploy more self-awareness in my life. For so long, when fear, anger, depression, stress, anxiety would surface in my life, I had this uncanny ability just to internalize it, compartmentalize it, and source it as jet fuel and just use it to work even harder. Because if I could just cross over this little hump, I will deal with these internal challenges in my life, right? And again, it took me a long time to realize that that's just avoidance, and that shit, it doesn't go anywhere. It just builds up and builds up, builds up and builds up, and it's going to explode at some point in time. I've had one too many, moments of explosions in my life where I started to realize something, it has to be done differently. And so that self-awareness piece is paramount. Understanding that the emotions, you said it, that are surfacing, right? This is, Rumi. This is his poem, The Guest House. Like, all of these emotions are knocking at your heart's door. Invite them in, give them a seat at the table, have a conversation with them, listen to them. What are they trying to say to you? That slowing down is actually the fastest way you can speed up, right? And when you can understand that it all starts with self-awareness, and you have everything you need to begin to practice and build your self-awareness muscle, that in and of itself can change everything. But upon recognizing, and I call it when I'm speaking from stage, when I'm, delivering a keynote, I would say the first thing that we do is we recognize the signal, right? We recognize the stress, the fear, the moment of inadequacy, the insecurity, the overwhelm, the dissatisfaction. Those are signals, not for you to overcome and outwork, but for you to be present with them, right? They're a signal. That's a profound paradigm shift that we have to be willing to embrace, and is made possible through self-awareness. I kid you not, for an entire 2 years of my life, because I was the least self-aware person you've ever met. For an entire 2 years of my life, I carried a little notebook in my back pocket. And I tell this story from stage. Everywhere I went, that notebook came with me. And it did not matter if I was driving down the interstate, if I was in the gym, if I was at the grocery store. Anytime I had an uncomfortable emotion surface in my life, I would stop what I was doing. I'd pull out that notebook and I would write it down. And I just did it out of, a hope that I could become a little bit more in tune with what I'm feeling to begin with. And then hopefully why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And like building any muscle, as I practiced it, I began to explore and build and grow in this area. And, suddenly I was back in the driver's seat of my emotions. I was making grounded decisions and not, these irrational, reactive decisions that got me in a lot of trouble day after day. Right. And so building that self-awareness muscle is important. And then the next thing that I'd say is we recenter it. And I have practiced so many different modalities of healing and therapy, from, CBT to being in the woods, taking a handful of mushrooms. Like I've done it all. And there is nothing more powerful than learning how your nervous system works and to work with your nervous system. And, there's a book out there called Anchored by Deb Dana. And she gives you, her and Stephen Porges, basically the type of nervous system work, polyvagal. It's a very foundational understanding of how your nervous system works. I read it once a year, profound book. And when we start to realize the role that our nervous systems plays in the sustainability of our success, and also the satisfaction that we can draw from our success, we start to realize that nervous system work is really, for me, the holy grail, right? And what I mean by that is, there's a guy out there. Have you read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, he talks about like this idea of the upper limit of success, right? We all have an upper limit of how much success we can create in our lives. Once we reach that threshold, our nervous systems come online and says, danger, 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 too much success. So the success that you work so hard to create, your nervous system is actually fighting against it, because they're saying, no, we've never been here before. This much success is too vulnerable. There's too much exposure. There's too much risk. We can fall. So even though externally and in our head, we're like, yeah, we're conquering it. We found the love of our life. We've got that new promotion. Our nervous system is going, danger, danger, danger. Fuck you. We're shutting it all down. And this is why we self-destruct or we self-sabotage, right? It's not because you're a bad person or you're inadequate or something's wrong with you. No, it's because your nervous system is designed to protect you and it's protecting you. So what we have to do, and this happens with, when we're running really fast, our nervous systems are usually the very first thing that we ignore and betray. And so they're going to work against us. They're going to shut it down. And so when we think about our upper limit of success, when we reach that threshold, the messengers, the indicators, the signals telling us that we've reached that threshold is the overwhelm, is the stress, is the dissatisfaction, is the lack of fulfillment, is the anxiety, the stress, whatever it is. Those are all just simply signals that, hey, you've reached your threshold. Now I need you to expand it. So by recentering, learning how to befriend our nervous system, learning how to recenter our nervous system in the moments of deep stress and overwhelm and of fear, what you're doing is you're moving from stress to stretch, stress to stretch, stress to stretch. What you're doing is you're telling your nervous system, hey, we maxed you out, but we're okay. I'm going to stretch you a little bit. And we're going to hold this tension with intentionality, with awareness, with compassion. And I'm going to ground you here in this moment of overwhelm. And I'm going to teach you little by little, nervous system, that we're okay. And a lot of people will use, and the way that I describe my nervous system in my book is it's our inner child. And the inner child concept is brilliant because when you think about it, even though we might be grown ass adults, our psyche could just be very adolescent. Our psyche is still stuck in our past. And that's the role of trauma. That's the effect of trauma. And so you have these moments that have marked your little child, that psyche, right? And for a lot of overachievers or high achievers, we've used those moments of pain as our fuel, as our ambition. And while we have gotten chronologically older in our age, and while we've grown up externally and we've reached levels of success, there's still a little boy or a little girl inside of each and every one of us. And that's our nervous system. Trauma keeps our nervous system stuck in the past, in the moments of pain. And that pain that happened when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, whenever it happened, is kind of the precedent of your trauma system. It's the guiding belief system of your nervous system, right? It's the guiding belief that says, hey, we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that shit never happens again. Mm-hmm. And so when you start reaching too much success, or you find yourself in a really great relationship and life is really good and the peace is a little unnerving, it's a little unsettling, and we start shutting it down. We start making stupid decisions. We start whatever it might be. What's happening is that little boy inside of you, that little girl inside of you is scared. They're saying, we don't want to get hurt again. So we're going to actively work against you. And so by looking back at that little boy and that little girl and say, hey, man, we're not who we used to be. We've grown. We're not defenseless like we used to be. I've got tools now. I've got community now. I've got resources now. This is making me tear up as I'm saying this because it's so relevant to me. Like, we're okay, little boy Caleb. You don't have to self-destruct. You don't have to self-sabotage. We got this, right? And what you're doing is you're teaching your nervous system it's safe. At this level of success, it's safe. And man, most people think that the next evolution of success for their lives and the sustainability of that success is the byproduct of hard work alone, and it's wrong. It's the byproduct of creating a nervous system that feels safe at that level of success. And if you can get that down, and if you can learn how to befriend your nervous system, yeah, it changes everything.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That is powerful.